my name's Gary. If you can't hear me, I'll try to shout. Tell me if there's problems with the hearing. Oh, this is even great. This is even better. Look, right at the beginning. I'm a developer advocate for. I'm a developer advocate for JetBrains, makers of the fine PHP Storm IDE. So I guess my first question is, how many people use PHP Storm? I often say I have the easiest job in the world, right? So I think nearly everybody in the room put their hand up. That's really cool. No, it's fine. OK, we have battery. This is another problem solved. Yep, cool. OK, so if you use PHP Storm, this should look familiar. Personally, I hate this white theme. It's my own. If I walk over here, my voice gets louder. It's not good. I can't type, and it's fine. I'll just take it off if I have to. Yeah, so I hate this white theme. I normally use the dark color theme, but because I do a lot of screenshots and videos and other stuff, I tend to try and keep my IDE default just to make sure that people see it as being familiar. But, you know, it's all good. It's up to you. This may be familiar to anyone who's been using PHP Storm. We've got this horrible project pane in the left-hand side. We've got the database browser open in the right. I'm going to take that off because it's not doing any good. We've got the database browser open in the right-hand side. You know, we've got the terminal open in the bottom. So one of my favorite combinations, key combinations I use, is to hide all the windows. So when you're actually, oh, yeah, we don't have Presentation Assistant. That's not good. When you're actually hiding all of the windows, then you can actually move straight to the code. So this is a Markdown file, which is why you can see it as nice text. You can see there it's Markdown. So we've got a Markdown editor built right in. And excuse me while I make sure the Presentation Assistant is working, because without that, you'll never know what key combinations I use. Oh, OK. So now we're going to update as well as do everything else. This is going to be really interesting. What could possibly go wrong, right? Yeah, so we've got hide all windows. The Presentation Assistant will just show you in the bottom of the screen which key combination I'm using. So without that, this talk is largely useless. So I have to try and sort of make this happen live. So it's all good. OK. OK, there we go. I'm an expert. So yeah, so hide all windows, which is Shift Command and F12. But what it will do is it will toggle. So for example, if we did have the database and the project pane open, I can use this to toggle between the two states, which is really, really useful. You also may notice that I don't actually have any tabs. I don't use tabs when I'm working with PHP Storm. I tend to not like to have a tabbed environment. It's my own personal preference. But, you know, it's each to their own. So the reason that I don't have tabs is I like to try and use the keyboard as much as I can. So I try and not use the mouse to navigate. Now, this is personal preference. I know a number of people who've had sort of RSI type injuries where they can't really use the mouse anymore. So it's a pretty good habit to get into. So one of the reasons I don't use tabs is because I'm I've got into the habit, of using the keyboard combinations to open files. So, for example, you can use double shift, which will search everywhere. So this is going to search every single part of the IDE to find something. The interesting thing here is we can put pretty much anything into this box. So, for example, we can put a class name, and we'll find the file name. We'll find it as the class name, and we'll find it as files down here and symbols. But the most interesting thing is, if you can see right here, it's telling me the best way to get to this file in the future by using a keyboard shortcut. So it's saying, yeah, if I were you, I would start using recent files to get to this file, which is Command-E, and then type Service Manager. So if I hit Escape, incidentally, if you ever get deep into the menus and you don't know where you are or how you got there, mashing Escape will always take you back to your editor. It's a really good tip too. So now I can use Command-E, which is my recent files, and I can start typing. The interesting thing here is you can type parts of file names or even just like camel case. So, for example, if I know that I want to open the Service Manager test, I tend to hit SMT, which is Service Manager test, to find the file really quickly. Again, some of this stuff is personal preference, but the navigation around your files is kind of key for me to be able to use PHP Storm effectively and efficiently. Speaking of which, I'm in a test. There's a keyboard combination that allows you to flick between a test and the test subject. So assuming everybody in this room uses unit tests, anyone willing to be brave enough to admit they don't do unit tests? I like you people for admitting it. It's really cool. You should definitely have gone to the workshop yesterday. You missed it today, unfortunately. But to navigate between tests and their test subjects is a keyboard combination, Command-Shift-T. So you can see this has taken me to the subject of the test. Now I'm in the Service Manager. And if I hit it again, it does give me a prompt to check that this is the right test, but it takes me straight to the test. It's really useful. I know some people like to have like 2 tabs, one with the test and one with the test subject. But for me, I just tend to use these shortcuts to flip between the test and the subject. Oh, another really nice keyboard shortcut. So I'm just going to quickly show you through the navigation tools first, and then we'll move on to some of the more interesting features. But a really nice tip when I'm in here. So if you didn't know, this box in the top right-hand corner is telling me the state of this file, the analysis results of this file. So effectively, PHP Storm is saying, okay, this isn't green, where everything is fine, but it isn't red, where there's a definite error. This is in a kind of mid-state, where there's some warnings found. 5 weak warnings and 70 typos. In my actual working environment, I tend to turn the typo inspection off, personally, because it just starts to really get on my nerves, because as developers, we're always making up new words to describe something, or we're using Americanized spelling here and non-Americanized here. So yeah, it tends to annoy me. I don't mind having a typo in my variable names. Kind of that's what code reviews are for me. So yeah, I tend to turn that one off. But more interestingly is you can use F2 to navigate between the results of the problems in this file. And they will go in severity. So for example, we only have some warnings here. There's a deprecated, we're using a deprecated class there. And there, and there, and there. And then there's some problems with these doc blocks. They probably don't match, the actual method. So these are just warnings. So we can navigate through all of the warnings and back to the top. If I put a deliberate error in here, oh, I should have, good job I turned the typo warning on, right? So now what it will do is it will only let me navigate between the most severe error. So I can only use F2. Because there's an error in this file, it won't let me move past the error. So it's a good way to kind of work through the problems in the file in order of severity. If you have any questions, please feel free to just shout them out at any time. I'm more than happy to take questions at any point. Or put your hand up and I'll probably notice you. The other thing you'll notice is that when we do have errors in the gutter here, which is where the scroll bar is, you can see it's telling me where in the file these errors are. So now that I have a proper error, you can see the brown blob has changed to a red exclamation mark. And if we're looking here, you can actually use this is the editor lens to see what the problem is at that line of code without getting there. If I click there, obviously it'll take me to the problem. But that's a really neat way to say, oh, what is this big block down here? Oh, it's a doc block problem. I won't bother looking at it now. So when we do have problems, yeah.
Is there a feature, I don't want to look at that now. I would like to create a to-do for that. Is that a feature?
Yeah, absolutely. You can just create a to-do anywhere. So I don't know if anyone knows, I can just create a to-do here and say, fix this later. Let's get rid of that horrible I. And then there's a to-do browser down here, which will give you all of the to-dos that you've added in the project. So now you can see in Service Manager, we have fix this later. So there is a to-do, there's a to-do system built right into the IDE, which is pretty cool. You can view to-dos in all different scopes as well. Because for example, this has to-dos in tests, and I may only want to look at to-dos in the actual production files. So yeah, you can do that. Whenever we have a problem, there's a number of ways we can fix things. Normally we'd end up fixing things by hand, but if I use function F2 to move down to the doc block here, everywhere that you see a problem, which is typically donated by a different colored squiggly line underneath, I know you can change all that setting, but that's the typical way that you can see there's a problem. We have an intention, as we call it, show intention actions, which is Alt and Enter, which will give you ways PHP Storm thinks it can fix that problem for you. So in this instance, the error we're having is the PHP doc comment doesn't contain all the necessary throw tags. Now, I can update the PHP comment. Now you think, oh, hang on, what's it done here? It's actually removed some throws. Yeah, that's because they were throws for errors that this function didn't actually throw. So it's tidied up the doc blocks for me and said, okay, the doc blocks now match the function signature, which is really, really useful if if you're doing a lot of refactoring and then your doc blocks get out of sync. It's nice to be told that there's the problem there and be able to fix it really easily. These intention actions can be like super powerful. So let's do something awesome. And what do we have in scope here? Let's just do this. Services. So I've just called a method that doesn't exist in the context of this class. That's all I've done is create a method call to a method that doesn't exist. So method do something awesome isn't found. So what is the intention action here? You'll often hear this referred to as quick fix, which I prefer. So this is the quick fix. So what can I quick fix here? Well, you've called a method that doesn't exist. Let's just quick fix it by creating the method. And you can see that it's created the function for me with the correct tag here. So there's lots of really, really nice ways that we can use quick fixes to get our code fixed really, really quickly. Incidentally, this works if you create a new class that doesn't exist. So if I did $class, let's do it in the actual scope of something. $class equals new my class. You can see that doesn't exist, but I have the intention to create the class. So this can be a really neat way to actually code, is to think, oh, I need a function here that will actually do this. Just call it and then use the intention, the quick fix, to create it. Can be a neat way to code. I tend to work like that quite often. So there's another way that we will tend to actually in fact, let's keep that there and let's do some really quick code. So if services, let's say if count services greater than 10, return true, return false, okay? So it's a really, really simple method here. We can really easily refactor this into other things by using Control-T to bring up the refactor menu. So for example, I might want to refactor this part into another method. Now, it won't let me do that because of the return, and I did that on purpose. There's no way that we can actually refactor this using automatic refactoring unless I use some kind of variable. So in this case, we'll say return equals true. Okay, there's duplication there. I apologize. Don't judge me. So now we've got a function that I can actually refactor into another method if I want to. So in this case, we can say, okay, let's refactor this bit into its own method. And let's call it, is this bad code? And then you can see I can say what parameters to pass in. And then I can refactor it. And it's going to create the refactored method for me right here, including the doc blocks. I'll show you a bit later on, if we have PHP 7 enabled and we're using parameter type hints, it will also add in the parameter type hints and the return type for us, which is really cool. But the refactoring tools are some of the most powerful things I see underused in PHP Storm. If you're in a project where you do a lot of refactoring, these things can be really, really nice. Any questions? Cool. Okay, so we're talking now about how we can code quicker and easier. One of my favorite parts of the IDE are called live templates. So live templates you can use to create snippets of code quickly without actually typing it out. And you can find information about them in the preferences pane under live templates, weirdly. I'm terrible at remembering where all the preferences are. There's so many of them. So the search facility is your friend here. So you can see we have live templates for all these different languages and markup. So we got JavaScript one, SQL stuff, but we're really interested in the PHP. So what you're seeing here is a list of the live templates. And effectively, if I type these letters and press tab, it's going to give me the code on the right. So for example, if I want to do a for each over the services array, I can do for ek, which is for each with a key. So I can say for ek, and then it's going to create the snippet of code for me. I just hit tab after for ek. That's all I've done is press tab there, and it's created the code for me. So I can now say this services. This is one of my favorite parts of the IDE. Notice that when I type services here, this automatically updates to be the singular of the plural, which is like magic voodoo for me. I have no idea how that works, but it's like, oh, look, it's giving me a sane name for my variable in this for each, which is really neat. So these live templates are super cool. Interestingly, you can create your own live templates. So for instance, this is one that I've created in my own IDE, right? Because var dump die, even though I do a good talk on debugging, I think everybody still types var dump die like 100 times a day at least. So this is one that I've done myself. So it's really, really easy to do. The abbreviation, this is what you're going to type. A description, debugging is hard. Anything that starts with dollar and ends with dollar is treated as a variable. So you don't have to think about what you're doing, just stick anything in there. And then the only thing that you have to do to make this work is to make sure you give it a scope. So say this is available in the scope of any PHP class. And it's as easy as that to create your own live template. So if you do a lot of code, using maybe your own custom framework, you can create your own live templates, which is really, really nice. Also, lots of modern frameworks and dev tools actually ship with live templates. If you Google live templates, PHP unit, for example, there's a whole bunch of live templates for PHP unit. If you use PHP spec, they provide them. Laravel provides some. Most modern packages will actually have a live template library you can just download and use, which is really neat. So you can see, if I do VDD and tab, it's asking me what I want to var dump there, which is kind of neat. So yeah, that's one of the things I use quite a lot as well. The reverse, yeah, shoot.
Where are those stored?
Where are they stored? They're stored on your local machine in your settings.
So how can I make them? I would like to store them as part of the project so that everybody who uses PHP Storm to work on the project gets the same live templates. Okay, yeah, that's a little bit out of the scope of this talk and will take too long for me to explain. The question is, can I share those as part of a project specific library, so everybody who's working on your project can have the same things? It is possible to do, but I'll speak about it later because we're a little bit tight for time. So the opposite of live templates is something called postfix completion. Now, I don't use this a lot, but I've seen people developing who use this tons. So it's kind of the opposite, where you type what you want to work on first and then use a dot, and then how you want to work on it. Again, we can find a list of these behaviors, and I will give you a demo because I understand that was a very confusing explanation. So you can see that all I've done is use the search facility to find postfix, and here's a list of what we've got. So you can do a not on the expression, you can echo else, for each over it, if, is it set, if it's not null, there's all these normal things, and we can throw an exception and we can var dump it. So if we just pick one of these at random, let's just do a for each again. So instead of type in for ek and then tab, we do the opposite. We type what we want to for each over. So in this instance, it's this services, and then dot, and then fe tab, and it kind of does it from behind, which can be really useful if you're in a habit of, if you don't want to have to move your cursor back to before what you've actually typed. You're like, oh yeah, I've typed this out, but now I realize I want to iterate over it, or add an if around it, or it needs to be not null. It's really useful for that. These are really good magic as well. You can't add your own postfix completion at the moment, but it's in the pipeline. It'll definitely be coming soon, where you can add your own things in there. Another thing that I really like, which took me a long time, I've kind of been trying to force myself to work with the keyboard, is you can easily select the correct selection you want with the keyboard by using Alt up and Alt down. So I can Alt up to select. So where my caret is here, I hope you can see it's in the middle of the word services. Alt up selects the word services. Alt up again selects the next context, which would be this service. Alt up again will select the var dump, and then it'll select the var dump with its semicolon, and then the whole of the block, and then this block, and then the whole of the class with its definition, the whole of the class with its definition and doc blocks, and then so on and so on, up, 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 up. And then we can come back down, so we can go all the way back down to the scope of just the word services again. So that's really useful for just being able to select stuff really quickly to work on it. So if you use tabs, I'm really interested, and there is no right or wrong answer, but hands up who does just use tabs when they're working with PHP Storm. It's fine, it's just for my own interest. Okay, cool. And so I assume the rest of the people don't use tabs, which is interesting for me. One of the ways I have worked, I don't work like this very often, and again, because I can never remember where anything is stored, I always use Command-Shift-A, which is search for an action or option.
So this will search for things I know I can do or things I know I can set, and this is really useful. So for example, I know I want to split this pane horizontally. Now I can see that it's in editor tabs, but life's too short for actually looking in the menu, so I can split this horizontally. So we can have 2 panes. Obviously I can have a different file open in the bottom pane as I can have in the top pane. Let's open the test. So that's kind of useful. We can also split vertically, which is very useful if you have kind of a large monitor. You can have 2 or maybe more files. You can see that I can keep doing this forever until it's like tab inception, where it's impossible to work. This is really useful. There's been somebody mentioned in a talk I did last week that it would be really useful if I scroll down this file, it would scroll down this file as well, which I think is a good idea. So we'll, almost like in a diff view when you're working with a diff, that could be useful. So that's definitely something I'll bring up. Just close these using Command W or whatever the Windows equivalent is. I'm sorry, I should know, to get back to where you came from. So that can be kind of a neat way to work if you want to look at things side by side. The other thing I really use a lot is the scratch file. So Command-Shift-N will allow you to create a new scratch file and ask you for the PHP. So this is an in-memory file that is effectively run using the inspections and intentions from its file name. So this is a PHP file. The good thing about this is that it's a throwaway file, but it has all of the inspections and intentions of a normal PHP file. So if I start typing, gibberish, it's going to give me the errors that I always have. So even though it's a throwaway in-memory file for maybe prototyping or just messing about or maybe copy and pasting some code in there just to think, oh, I can't really figure out what's going on here, you still get all the inspections and intentions you need. So I find this to be like really, really useful. We can, for EK again in here, we get all of the live templates and the postfix and everything that I've shown you. And be careful, because obviously if you have code in here you want to keep and you quit your IDE by accident, this stuff is gone forever. It's only ever saved in memory, so it is kind of dangerous. Yes. Absolutely, it is actually saved to disk, but it's actually stored in memory. But because of the way the PHP Storm works, if the IDE crashes, for example, you won't lose this. If the IDE crashes, it'll dump all this stuff from memory to disk before it crashes, and you'll actually get these back. If you manually close your IDE and close the project, you've got about a 50% chance that it'll still be there the next time you open it up. So which is why I just say to people, don't rely on it ever, because it's easier for me to say that than the truth, if I'm honest. So yeah, I would never rely on this being available the next time I open my IDE. There is some garbage collection and stuff that goes on every time you close your IDE, and it may not happen once, it may not happen twice, but it'll certainly go away at some point. Yep. Yep. And absolutely, these do stay here, but they do get garbage collected. So you cannot rely on these being here. Like, if you're working on something in a work in progress, you want that to be under your version control, unless it's a really throwaway idea, unless you're literally saying, oh, I wonder if this is possible, does this make sense? They should still be under version control. So I would definitely not rely on those scratches being available, personally. The other little thing that I wanted to show is if we open another PHP file again and look at me using the mouse, I'm a bad man after saying that, there we go. You can see down in the right-hand corner this little guy with a bowler hat, and it looks like he's always sad, but apparently that's actually a mustache, so he's not always sad, it's fine. This is Hector, the inspector, not my name, don't judge me. This allows you to quickly say exactly how much inspections are going on in the IDE. So for example, when I'm not demoing here, I'll typically turn HTML inspections off. I don't do much HTML. So for me, I don't need those HTML inspections running all the time, so I'll knock them off. Maybe I'm on a plane and I want to eke the last of my battery out. I can turn the PHP inspections down to just syntax or none. And this power save mode will basically turn the IDE into effectively just a text editor, which is fairly pointless. But again, if you're working on a plane or somewhere where you don't have any battery, it can be useful just to eke out another 10 or 15 minutes. So yeah, I'll have to turn that back on, otherwise some things I want to demo you later will fail and I won't know why. But when I'm actually working, I do often work with the HTML inspections off. PHP 7 is one of my favorite things to have happened since I've been a developer, and PHP Storm has some really good PHP 7 support now. Again, this is not judging or a right or wrong answer. Hands up if you're using PHP 7 in production. Okay, it's getting good, it's getting good. I encourage everybody to try. I know it's easy for me to say it, and it's much harder for people to actually do it in reality. I totally understand that, but for me, it's definitely worth the effort to do it. Because one of the things you get with PHP 7 is the new scalar type hints and the new return type hints. So instead of just being able to type hint on an object type or an array, we can now type hint on a string or an integer or a float or a boolean. You know, it's really, really useful to try and reduce the number of unit tests you have to write, particularly. And working with PHP Storm, we can do something where, for example, I want to say I'm definitely going to pass an array of services in there, and I'm always going to return a boolean. Now, PHP, obviously array was able to do before, but PHP Storm is saying to me, you can't do this because you're not set in PHP 7 mode. One of the most common things I see is that people don't have their PHP configured correctly in PHP Storm. So because I'm currently, PHP Storm thinks I'm running PHP 5.6, but I can just say using quick fix, yep, switch to PHP 7 mode, please. This is where things get really interesting. So if you want to check how PHP Storm thinks your PHP is configured, language and frameworks PHP, it's this drop down here that is the language level that you're targeting. That's not necessarily the language level that you're running the interpreter on, because you could be running PHP 7.2, but your user base is going to be 7, so you don't want them to be exactly the same. But this is useful because you'll get inspections telling you, oh, you've used this and it's not available in your target PHP language. So I'm going to say, let's target 7.1. I'm running 7.1.old at this point, so yeah, don't judge me. But now that we've added return type hints, this is where things really get interesting, because let's say, for example, that I say return equals 0 here. In fact, let's get rid of this and make it much less complicated. So let's say that I say return equals 0 instead of false. Now, we don't actually get an error at this point, and that's because I don't have strict types enabled, so this would work perfectly well. When we return 0 in non-strict types, PHP 7 would just cast this to a Boolean for me, so it would actually return false. This is one of the two ways that the type hinting works in PHP for confusion. For me, I think it's like always, always, always important to work in strict types mode. So PHP will error if you pass in the wrong parameter type or if you return the wrong parameter type. In order to do that, we need to add a declaration at the top of the file. Declare strict types equals 1. Now, you might have noticed that PHP Storm was erroring because there's actually an inspection for this. One of the things that I find really, really hard to do, particularly as I do a lot of open source work, converting libraries into PHP 7, is to remember to type declare strict types equals 1 at the top of every file that I'm working on. Or, you know, even worse, I want to add it to the top of every file because I'm converting a whole project to PHP 7. So, oh look, yeah, let's make this parse at least. So there's an inspection for that in PHP Storm. So it's called, which we can see here, strict types declaration is missing. And you can see I've set this to be an error. It comes out of the box to be a warning, but I like things, you know, I want this to be, yeah, fail. I don't want to forget to do this because it's worse for me to have unexpected behavior than just a warning. You know, I want this to be a strict type hinted project. Because we've got the inspection file in there, I can now use quick fix to add the declare strict types right at the top of the file. And if we scroll back down to the function we're working on, now we can see we have an error to say, hey, you're returning a 0 and you should be returning a Boolean. And of course, this works with the actual strict types as well. If I can find where I call do something awesome. So to find out where I called that, I should have told you, I just command clicked. If I command click on this method, it tells me where I'm using it. So I can go right up here. And now you can see it's giving me an error here as well. Parameters expecting this to be a string, and I'm passing in an array. This is pretty much in PHP the closest to static analysis at code time that I've personally seen. I know there are some projects out there to help you to do this. Stuff like PHP Stan is getting close. But this is as close to static analysis at development time I've ever seen. And it's really, really useful to catch these type problems. In my experience, type problems have been some of the most common bugs to find in PHP for me. So to be able to catch these at dev time is really super cool. Interestingly, if you do have a project that you're trying to convert to PHP 7 and you want to do this, it's actually possible to run all of the inspections in PHP Storm on your project all at one time or in any scope of your project. So if I go to code and then run inspection by name, instead of me having to only see the results of an inspection when I open the file, I can run it against the scope of the whole project. So for example, in this instance, we want strict type, missing strict types declaration, and I want to run it across the whole project. Let's make sure that all of the files in my project have this declaration added by using the inspection. So I can run here, and you can see PHP Storm's running, and it says, oh, look, you've got 101 warnings, 101 files that don't have the strict type, so we can see them. This is just an open source project I'm working on, Zen Framework Service Manager. Yeah, look, this factory doesn't add it. Okay, we can add that in right there. That's nice. But more interestingly is we can just like add it to all of the 101 files in one click. So now we've just added declare strict types to the top of every file in our project. Open source maintainers will love you if you do 101 files touched with just one line changed. But hey, you know, it's worth doing in your own project. It's really, really useful. You can do this for any of the inspections at all. So, you know, let's see how many typos we've got in our excuse me. Let's see how many typos we've got in our project. Again, we can do run inspection by name, and I'm not going to use the menu because, so let's run the typo inspection, which I've told you I hate. And let's run that on the whole project, and you can see it's found them all right there. So you can use this for any of the inspections in PHP Storm, and I find that to be like a really powerful tool. I like to use this when I've opened up a new code base and I want to get an immediate understanding of how the code base looks. Running a few of these inspections to give me an idea is kind of a cool way to do it. Any questions? Cool. So the next thing I want to show you is I hope everybody uses version control systems now, and I'm not going to embarrass anyone by asking you to put your hand up if you don't. Dropbox doesn't count. But of course, you know, and everybody should be in the habit of checking stuff in regularly and checking it in often. But there's always those times where you forget, or you go for lunch, or you do something catastrophic, and then, you know, you haven't checked it in, and you're like, oh, what have I done here? So inside of PHP Storm, under VCS, which it really shouldn't be, that's a bit cheeky of our developers to call it VCS, but you've got local history. So I can show the history of this file since I've been working on it in this session. So there's this little catch-all, a little helper for when you do something really stupid, and we've all done that. I certainly do it more than most, and this has saved me more times than I'd care to actually explain. There's this little built-in version control, I guess it's not. But you can see what's changed here, and we can revert back to any of these. And this shows you how often I've been practicing this talk, so let's get out of there quickly. But yeah, it's built in, and it can be really useful when you do something and you've spent 3 hours since your last git check-in, or 3 days, or 3 weeks, God forbid. To have that way to roll back to what you've done can be really handy. The other thing that I really, really, really like, and I just said that how local history is a bit of a misnomer under VCS. This is hidden gracefully under test RESTful web services, and this is the most worst named tool in the entire IDE. So test RESTful web services, what the hell is that going to do? Well, actually it's just a full HTTP client built into your IDE, hidden under that horrible name. So honestly, this is like an amazing find when I realized that this was just living in my IDE. It's got everything that you'd ever need. So if you use something like Postman, or you're familiar with a graphical tool for making HTTP requests, this has nothing to do with REST, by the way. It's just a HTTP client. You can add your headers here. You can quickly and easily add authentication headers if you need to do that. Yeah, we can just do a GET request to my de facto API of choice, which is Lorna's joined in API. Thank you, Lorna. You can see the result right here. So I've just done a GET request to this API, and there's the result. I mean, we can make them more friendly to read by clicking that button, and there we go. You can see we've got those right there. We can see the response headers. We can set cookies. We can see cookies. It's a really powerful HTTP client right built within your IDE. Yeah, shoot.
Is there any way to save some sample requests and share them across teams?
Actually, there's not in this version, but if you get PHP Storm 2017.3, we're going to have a way to be able to rerun these HTTP requests by just writing into a specifically formatted file, which is really cool. So it's a step towards automating testing of your API from your IDE. I'm not sure I like that so much, but yeah, you watch this space because it's going to be available soon. Was there another question? Yeah, okay, cool. Yeah, there's a way 2017.3, it's on our blog at the moment. There's a post about, because the early access program's available for you to try. So take a look on the blog post if that's something that interests you. How are we doing for time? We're doing okay. Okay. Another thing I really like is the way that you can configure and run external tools. So you may have noticed a lot of the things I've been showing you in the last 10 to 15 minutes is trying to help you from being able to do everything in your IDE without having to leave to go to another tool. That's not actually a power trip where we're like, you must use our IDE all the time. It's just to try and make things as easy as possible to be able to do everything from within one tool. So there's a terminal. Most people will be aware that there's a built-in terminal. It's kind of a standard thing. A kind of cool thing about the terminal is that you can add new tabs and name them. This is not going to look really great on this bad resolution screen, but I'll do the best I can. So yeah, we can just run top in there all the time if we want. The interesting thing is we can detach these tabs from within the terminal, and if I was working with tabs, I could attach it into the tabs up here. So I could have this as just a tab in my normal everyday tabs up here. I can just totally detach it and put it on another monitor if I had one. I don't have one, but it's useful to know that these terminals can be just made first-class citizens and put into your tabs, and we can rename them, which is kind of nice. The external tools are really cool. So, for example, I may run PHP-CS in here, and yeah, look at this. I got tons of errors because I've just made a wholesale change to the code base with an inspection in PHP Storm. So yeah, totally expected. So I don't know how many people use tools like PHP-CS and PHP-MD and other tools that they may run on their project periodically. It's really nice that we can just do it in the terminal. But we can actually use these tools from right within our IDE. So if I go to external tools, and again, I'm using the search action on name because I cannot be bothered to actually find where it is. I want external tools in preferences on the right. So you can see I've got PHP-CS configured in external tools. So let's take a look at that. All I need to do is to say, the name is PHP-CS, here's a description, this is the group it goes in. And what do? I run my global install of PHP-CS, and I want the working directory to be the root of this project. So now I've just created an external tool that is plugged into PHP Storm. And the really interesting thing about this is that I can go to Tools and then External Tools, and I can just run it from right within my IDE, which is, that's fairly neat, but it's not exactly groundbreaking. But if I go to the key map, if I use the actual right keys, if I go to the key map and then go to external tools, you can see that I can actually assign a key combination to that external tool that I've just set up. So in this instance, I've done Command-Shift-M. So if I run Command-Shift-M, you can see that I can now run PHP-CS right onto my code anytime I want with one key combination. That's really, really useful for a lot of these. We just talked about PHP Stan, the static analysis tool. There's so many of these tools that maybe you want to run periodically just to check code quality or whatever you want to do. I know that most people will have these being run at build time, but it's still nice to be able to easily run them at development time as well. Any questions? Yeah, shoot.
I think there was an option to react that the terminal would be only shown if the exit code is not 0.
Yes, that's true. So if we go to, I will quickly show you that. So if we go to the external tools, we can say that only show the console if there's output, basically. So there's a different way. You don't necessarily need to fire the console up at the bottom of the screen. So maybe you don't want to see the console if everything's fine. You only want to see it if there's a problem. You can configure that to however you want it to run. I've seen some people do some really crazy
sort of complex stuff for those external tools to work for them. Was there? Is there a shortcut to minimize the terminal? There certainly is. I don't know it off the top of my head. So yeah, I don't know what that is. Let's take a look in the key map. Yeah, it's Alt and F12. I don't tend to use that because what I tend to do is to have, as I discussed earlier, I tend to have the terminal open and then use hide all windows to code. And then when I want it back, I just flick it back using hide all windows to go back to the same state. Yeah, shoot. Is there a way to run the tools over Vagrant? I actually don't know. That's a very good question. It's a very good question. I believe that the tools will run on whatever PHP interpreter you've configured. So if you've configured a Vagrant PHP interpreter, the tools will run on that interpreter on the Vagrant machine. I'm not 100% on that. So it will. Thank you very much. You all need my job. Thank you very much. Yeah. Apparently it will. So, yeah, shoot. So because it absolutely depends on the work, how you configure this. I've configured this for the working directory to be project file dir, which means that it's going to work on this directory, which means it's going to use this phpcs.xml file to determine the scope and how it's run. So it really depends on how you have that configured previously.
So you can configure several
Yes. Yeah. You absolutely, yeah. You can configure it. If you look where I've got project file dir, there's a number of different they say macros, but they're not. They're like variables. So you can say like current file name would mean that when you run this, it would only run on the current file name. Shoot.
There's actually a way that you can get real feedback from your PHP if you activate the inspection.
Yes, so absolutely. So another way that you can do this is you can use the PHP CS inspection to show inspection results on your code live. I was just using this as an example of how to use it as an external tool. PHP CS can be run as an inspection. I haven't got time to show you that right now, but Google PHP Storm and PHP CS inspection. There's a good tutorial on how to do that. So you can use PHP CS as an inspection and PHP mess detector as well. So it's worth knowing. So we've kind of covered a lot of PHP type stuff. I don't know if everybody knows that PHP Storm is actually the whole of WebStorm plus PHP. So if you work with HTML and JavaScript, you've actually got the whole support for WebStorm. All of the WebStorm inspections and intentions for JavaScript and HTML are available in PHP Storm, plus the PHP stuff. So there's no need to buy both products. I know some people like to have sort of separate mind context and like to have WebStorm open for that kind of stuff, which is cool. Yeah, pay us twice, that's great. But there's no need to actually do that. So there's some really cool HTML features in PHP Storm. I'm going to just show you a couple of those just to kind of whet the appetite, so to speak. So this is a really, really basic HTML template in a Laravel project. And this is the result that you'll see just for this HTML page. Now what I've done here is I'm running in Chrome the JetBrains extension that you can see running here. So this is connected to my PHP Storm. And here I have a live edit plugin installed. It doesn't come shipped for default. You need to install the live edit plugin. And now I can have sort of Dreamweaver-esque. Oh, I do need to run the debug again. Excuse me. So all I'm going to do is say debug this. And it's going to load up in my browser. Come on, live demo. Don't fail me now. Don't fail me now. I've broken it. I'm so sorry. Let's try once more restart it. And we are running out of time, so okay. I think that's pretty catastrophic, but trust me when I say that you can do sort of old Dreamweaver style editing where what you type into the IDE is automatically updated without having to refresh. It's kind of neat. I'll quickly show you some of the other stuff that I really like around this. So we've got, similar to live templates for PHP, you've got stuff you can do in HTML. So for example, I can say, do me a div with some lorem ipsum in it, 3 paragraphs please, and press tab. And there you can see that it's just like created that for me right off the bat, which is kind of neat. So these are called emits. You can find them in the code to make your own, but this is really neat. So can I have a UL and then an LI times 5, please? And there you go. You can see that it's created that right there for me. That's really, really neat. Another interesting thing is if I hold Alt, I can do multiple cursors. So I can say number without having to type that 50 times. So I've got multiple cursors here. Hello. So we can have multiple cursors. That's just holding Alt. Whacking escape gets you out of the multiple cursors. Really neat as well. I like to mention this. I'm not going to have time to demo it because we are running out of time. But there's also you can use file watchers. So if you're using technologies like SAS, I think it is the CSS compiler, where you can write CSS in a different format. If you're using things like CoffeeScript that you need compiled down to JavaScript, there are file watchers you can use and configure. They'll automatically watch SAS files and compile them to CSS using the right tool when it detects a change. It's kind of neat. Just look for file watchers under your preferences, and you can see how you can configure them and what we support. Ideally, I'd like to show you, but you can create your own custom file watchers, or you can use all these like SAS, SCSS, CoffeeScript, anything that you use that you need to compile something after a change is quite useful. So we have kind of briefly mentioned it, but I would like to just quickly show that we do have a full database browser built into the IDE. So if you're working with a database and you want to see exactly what's going on, we do have this is just a Drupal project, so we have a full database browser just built in where you can just see what's going on in the database from right within the IDE. It's right in the right-hand pane. One of the ways that I navigate around most of these panes, I mean, we got Command 1 for project. We did say that it was Alt and F12 for terminal. Oh, that's actually just giving me increased volume, which is interesting. Yeah, it's fine, thanks. So that gives us the terminal. But one of the ways I use to navigate between these is Control Tab, which allows you to switch quickly between what you've just working on. So obviously, I need to keep my finger on Control to keep this menu up, and normally you wouldn't see that, but I'm doing it, so I can flick between the recent files that I've worked with that way. Interestingly, if I press Control-Tab, keep my finger on Control, and then press D, it's going to take me to the database pane. Control-Tab and then T takes me to the terminal pane. So this is the way that I tend to navigate around the different panes of the IDE, is using Control-Tab. And you can see on the left exactly what I can hit to get whatever I want open. As usual, once I've opened all of these hundreds of horrible things, I can just use hide all windows to get back to just working with what I want to work. If I quickly open Recent and go to the controller, once you have database access enabled, it now means that we have full code completion on SQL inside our IDE. So I can do $SQL equals select star from, and now I have completion based on the actual database tables that are in the database, which is kind of neat to be able to do these things. You'll only get this if you have a database configured in the left-hand database pane. So that's the only way you can get SQL completion. If you work with other stuff and you don't have, you want to create some HTML or some JavaScript in a string, you can actually do that from the context of a PHP file. So JS equals script. Now I get completion immediately because I've used the script tag. So that's really interesting, is that it's automatically detected that this is some JavaScript because I've used the script tag. But maybe I don't want to put the script tag in here, and maybe I still want to have JavaScript. That's a real mess, excuse me. Maybe I still want to have JavaScript inside this string. So I type, oh, it hasn't detected it. We can use a quick fix again to be able to do this. So inject language or reference, and then JavaScript will mean that this string will have JavaScript completion in it. So I can say, okay, JavaScript and now JavaScript's been temporarily injected. If I want to do this in a more permanent way, I can, and across the project, I can just use a PHP doc to say, okay, JS, the language is JS, and this string is now going to be handled as JavaScript across everybody's IDE. You can do that for JavaScript, CSS, HTML, SQL, and it works not only with strings, but with here docs as well. So if I do $JS equals, oh, I can't remember how the format. There we go. That'll work anyway. So there's two things I want to show you now, which is good timing because it's nearly lunch. The first thing is that one of the most asked about things ever is actually available now. You can have multiple projects inside one Chrome for PHP Storm. So if I go File and then Open, and then pick a random project from my amazing amount of projects on my machine. So let's pick Bootstrap 4 and then Open. You can see that if I say Open in current window, I can add it to the currently open project. So now I can have two projects open in one window, which was one of the most requested features we ever had. It's interesting though, because this project effectively has no configuration. It takes all the configuration from the first project in the list. So this is the parent project, and that's the only project where you can actually set any settings. So it's really important to think about that. If you're using deployment settings or configurations, it'll only take the first one. So it's not a perfect fix at all. But interesting if you work with an API and a front end and you want to have both projects open in the same editor effectively. Yeah, shoot.
One big branch is when you switch between projects, that the integration.
Yeah, Git is one thing that isn't actually used from a configuration perspective. Obviously, the Git integration in PHP Storm reads the .git folder from inside this project. So Git commits will go to the right place, yes. So yeah, that's really, really useful. And I'll leave you with one last thing. So if we go back to our service manager, people always ask me when I'm at conferences like this, or if I'm working on a booth, or whatever I'm doing, oh, there's so many features in these IDEs. How do I know what I don't know about? And I'm like, yeah, that's a really meta question, but I salute where you're going there. Because how do we know there's all these features, and how do I know which ones I'm using and which ones I aren't? But if you go to the help menu and then productivity guide, this is a really, really interesting pop-up. So this is showing me all the features in PHP Storm and how often I've used them. So we can sort them by used. Now, don't judge me because of the incredibly low numbers. I have to reinstall PHP Storm like every couple of weeks because obviously I have to run very new EAP versions and I have to test new features. So yeah, 235 times. I've had that number over 100,000 times when I've been working as a real developer. So yeah, good thing for you to be able to compare stats with your friends and your colleagues. But more interestingly is if you sort it by used going upwards. So now it's telling me exactly what features I never use in PHP Storm. So surround statements with I've never used in this install of the IDE, which is Command Alt and T. This is actually one of the most used features I use when I'm coding in Anger, because you can do something like, okay, let's surround this line with let's surround this line with a try-catch block. So it's a really useful feature, which I only just found about by using the help productivity guide. So this is a really cool thing to look at to find out any information that you need. My job is to try and help the users of PHP Storm and to try and take feature requests. And if you're having problems, come and find me. You can tweet me at any time at GGEEH. I'm always happy to take tweets on advice, on bugs. If you've got tickets that are open and you'd like me to take a look at them because they've been open for a long time, hit me up, because that is exactly my job. My job is to be the interface between the developers of PHP Storm and you, the developers, the users of PHP Storm. So contact me anytime. Yeah, shoot.
Do you collect data on the most used?
We collect anonymized data if you opt in, and some of that data is what features people are using. We absolutely don't reveal that data though, unfortunately.
It would be useful to get a list of the most used.
Yeah,
Everybody in the ecosystem.
We do use that internally, but our privacy policy is so tight that we absolutely don't reveal that to third parties. We are thinking about bringing in a new way where you can opt in to share your statistics. So you can have like a page on JetBrains.com where people can see your stats, which would be entirely opt-in, but...
I'm not talking about my stats, but for general.
Yeah.
So it's actually anonymous. It doesn't matter where
Yeah,
you came.
but our privacy policy, so the question is, do we collect combined stats to see exactly how many times these things are being used? The answer is yes, but our privacy policy is so tight because that's the kind of company that JetBrains are. We only use those for internal decision making. We never reveal them, even though they're anonymized. We still don't reveal any any data that we collect from people. It's interesting, I guess, and
Would be very useful, actually.
yeah, it would take a whole revision of our privacy policy. So unfortunately, I don't see that happening in the near future. Are there any more questions? Sure.
How is the Docker integration?
The Docker integration, getting better. Getting better. It's a political answer. I definitely think Docker is something that we're moving forward with. We've got Docker Compose support in the last version, which I find to be really useful. I think, I only use Docker through Docker Compose. So it's definitely something that you can expect to see getting better release on release. I know it's not the best. We know it's not the best at the moment. It's a very difficult thing to integrate into an IDE, believe it or not, because people can do so many different things using so many different tools. So yeah, it's getting there, I think. We support remote interpreters over Docker really well now. So if you're using Docker as your dev environment and your interpreter's running inside a Docker container, everything that you could previously do with Vagrant, you can now do with Docker. So you can run your PHP unit tests using a Docker interpreter. You can run your PHP-CS and PHP-MD stuff through a Docker interpreter. We still can't run a composer update or composer commands through a container, but you can't do that through Vagrant either. So that's something we're working on at the moment.
For Mac and Windows, do you still need third party to be installed in order to have the tools, socket?
No. In the recent versions of PHP Storm, if you're running Docker for Mac, if you're running Docker for Mac or Docker for Windows, you don't need any hacks anymore. It'll just connect since 2017.2. Shoot.
Third-party plugins, are they handled by your privacy policy? Is it safe to install any
No.
third-party plugin kind?
No, the plugin ecosystem, the question was, are third-party plugins covered by JetBrains IDE privacy policy, sorry? The answer is no. You want to be looking at the specific policies and licenses of the plugins before you install them. They don't... No, they don't. There's no hooks into data that is covered by JetBrains privacy policy. There's absolutely no way that people can read your usage stats unless you specifically allow them to. So, any other questions? Shoot.
How about unused code analysis? Is there any plan for introducing this?
Introducing code analysis? Unused code analysis, absolutely. Yes. As far as I'm aware, there's an inspection. We are really running out of time, but as far as I know, there is dead code, I believe, yeah. No.
Dead code. I'm referring to unused methods, unused classes.
Yeah, there is another.
Yeah, there is definitely an inspection.
Not a class, it was another word. And if you're using fund usages, you're going to know if a method is not used. But I want to check an entire project for unused methods and clean them out.
So there are inspections. You can see there's unused private method there. They'll tell you if a method is run. I don't think there's one catch-all inspection for like, I want to check for unused classes and unused methods and unused variables and unused, there is, but there are this massive suite of inspections that you can run.
You can't do that statically with PHP because you don't know what's going to be executed or loaded unless you actually run the scripts.
Yeah, but it uses our static analysis engine to do a best guess on that.
You can't do that for finding unused classes.
No, you can't do it for finding unused classes. You're absolutely right. Yeah, you can't do that using static analysis. But we can certainly find like unused local variables. You just have to run, unfortunately, there's not one inspection you can run. They'll give you the answer in one go. You'll have to run the individual inspections. Yeah, I don't think it's possible, is what we were just discussing. So yeah, it's fine. So we've just run out of time. So thank you very much. As I say, please feel free to tweet me at any time. Any questions you have, anything you want to share. Just point of note, there is a PHP Storm license being raffled during the closing of the conference. So stick around if you're interested in winning. I think you're going to have to be in the room to claim that license. So it's a 12-month license. So stick around if you're interested in winning that. And thank you very much indeed.